Grace and peace. Welcome to Judah's Roy Domestic Violence Awareness Initiative YouTube channel. I'm your host, Apostle Cheryl. Before we get started, I'll give you a few seconds. Check down here below the video. Make sure you subscribe to our channel if you've not done so already. Click the bell for notifications, and that way you'll receive a notice every time we upload a new video, typically on Sunday evenings at 4 p.m. Central Standard Time. Don't forget to share the video even as you view the video, and we thank you for that. Okay, now this is installment number 2 in our series about conflict resolution. Last week's video was, what is your conflict resolution style? And today we're going to be looking at 2 particular styles of the 5 styles that we have identified, okay? So, a quick recap, and if you haven't watched the first video, please go back and view it, right? So that we're all on the same page. So conflict is defined as to come into collision or disagreement, to be contradictory, in opposition, especially prolonged struggle or strife, all right? A conflict is a fight, it's a battle, or a struggle, and it also means to clash. And all of these synonyms, right? This definition is kind of riddled with intensity, right? And a sense of urgency, and maybe even like a violent meeting, not in a physical sense, but even in an emotional sense, okay? Then resolution. Resolution is defined as the act of determining upon an action, right? The course of action, method, or procedure. So resolution is the act of determining upon an action, a course of action, a method, or a procedure. And so when we're talking about conflict resolution in a very broad sense, it is the formal or informal process that 2 or more parties use to find a peaceful solution to their dispute, okay? And a conflict resolution style, as we discussed in the previous video, is essentially a set of behaviors, is even the perspective or the posture that we assume as individuals in response to being confronted with a challenge or a perceived conflict. And the goal of constructive conflict resolution is not to determine who's right and who's wrong. I'll say that again. It's not to determine who's right and who's wrong. That is not the end game. That's not the purpose of conflict resolution. So truly constructive conflict resolution is trying to identify a solution, a method, a course of action that addresses the concerns of all parties and lands on a decision, a course of action that everyone can live with, okay? So that is the backdrop. Now, we identified, according to the Thomas Kilmann conflict mode instrument, 5 styles: collaborating, competing, avoiding, accommodating, and compromising. And on the surface, one might sound like it's really fantastic and the other one might sound like, not so much. But there's really no right or wrong style. It's more about what's the appropriate style given the desired outcome and what the most important thing is about the conflict, right, for each party. So, as I've stated previously, it's important, I think, that we know ourselves, right? Because our conflict resolution style impacts our ability to interact with others, effectively and in a constructive manner. And as I stated in the previous video, there are 3 things that I've learned in my own life are really important to know when it comes to understanding your own go-to, okay? Because we all have, out of the 5 conflict resolution styles that we're going to be talking about in this series, we all have a go-to, one that we go to more often than others, one that we go to instinctively, really, without even thinking about it. It's our kind of like our baseline conflict resolution style. Is kind of how we approach life. It's how we navigate life. It's how we navigate conflicts, large and small. But it doesn't mean that the one that's our go-to is the most effective one, right? And so the purpose of this series is to help educate us about the different styles and the pros and cons of each. And we're going to focus on grasping what the most important thing is, I think, when it comes to conflict resolution is that we have to be able to identify the outcome that we desire. What is the outcome that we desire? And then, truthfully, why do we desire it? Do we just desire it because we feel like we have a right to have it? Or is there some other reason? What is the most important thing about why we desire it? What's the bottom line? What's the bottom line most important thing? Keeping in mind that not everything can be the most important thing. So the process that's chosen to address a conflict is as important as the conflict itself, right? You can't have a solution that's a setup or like a kangaroo court or where the people who are helping to resolve the conflict are biased in one way or another in favor of one party or another. So the process itself is important because if the process itself is not fair, then the whole idea of conflict resolution is essentially a sham. Okay. Now we're going to look at collaborating and competing. Collaborating is a combination of being assertive, okay, which is not aggressive, and cooperative. Collaborating is a combination of being assertive and cooperative. Those who collaborate attempt to work with others to identify a solution that fully addresses everyone's concerns. Someone who is a collaborator when it comes to conflict resolution, and that's their go to, is a person who bears a combination of being assertive and cooperative. Those who collaborate attempt to work with others to identify a solution that fully addresses everyone's concerns. Now, this person is not trying to tell people what they ought to be concerned about. This person is not deciding, evaluating on a scale of 1 to 10 the other party's desires or their importance. Okay. And so it's important to know that this style, collaborating, is the opposite of avoiding, which we'll talk about in another video. In this style, both sides get what they want, okay? In a collaborating style, both sides get what they want and negative feelings are minimized. Doesn't mean that there won't be any, but they are minimized, okay? Collaborating works best, this is important, when the long-term relationship and outcome are both important. When the long-term relationship and outcome are both important. So what would be an example of this? An intimate relationship, a friendship, um, because this denotes a person with whom the relationship is important. And one would hope that the relationship is important to both parties, right? But also that the outcome is also important. And so the most important thing would be the relationship when you're talking about collaborating. Um, and with a positive outcome that both parties can live with. Okay, so that's collaboration. Now, let's look at competing. This style is both assertive and uncooperative and willing to pursue having their concerns addressed at the expense of others. This style works when you don't care about the relationship, but the outcome is important. And it definitely, let me tell you something, does not build relationship. It does not build relationship because you come out of the starting block determining that the relationship itself is not important. Okay. And so competing involves being assertive and uncooperative, which means that the focus is simply just on getting my way. And I'm not willing to even hear reason. I'm not willing to assign any importance to your concerns or any legitimacy to your concerns. And I don't really care about the relationship. I'm just concerned about getting my way. I just want my way. That's it. And whoever has to pay for that just has to pay for that. Okay, so that's competing. That's competing. Now, having said that, you would think, well, collaborating sounds really amazing and competing, not so much. There are times, beloved, when competing may be appropriate. Like when, I hear you ask. Okay, so here we go. In a domestic violence relationship where the abusers made it clear that the relationship doesn't matter, that the well-being of their partner is not the most important thing, that the safety, the health, the morale of the partner is not the most important thing, the building a quality, nurturing, safe relationship is not the most important thing. It puts the victim at a complete disadvantage to assume a collaborative style with someone who is being assertive and probably aggressive and uncooperative. And so, if the other party doesn't have any real concern about the relationship, it puts you at a disadvantage as a victim to assign value to a relationship that's been devalued by the other party. So once it becomes clear that the relationship doesn't matter to the other party, I suggest you change your rules of engagement. Okay. And so that's why I think this series um, will be helpful, because it will help us to identify what our options are in terms of responding to conflict. Understand that conflict is not a static thing, that it can morph and change, right? As people's perspectives change, as their desires change, as their wants change. Um, and so you want to, when you're in a conflict, you want to consider the other person's position, and you want to try to really communicate and hear and understand what the most important thing is to them. And that will help you to decide if your response, if your go to needs to be addressed, if it needs to be changed, if it needs to be modified so that it's appropriate to the situation. So, again, when it comes to domestic violence, if you're dealing with someone who has no regard for your well being and your safety, your mental health, your physical security, your financial security, your safety in general, then it's unwise to assume a collaborative style with someone who's not truly collaborating at all. They're undermining. All right. So we've been talking about conflict resolution, and we've addressed collaborating and competing, and how they're similar and how they're different. Now, how are they similar? Both the collaborating style and the competing style are assertive. They've just assumed different positions, and they have different end games. They have different goals, okay, that are opposed to one another. Join us going forward, and we'll be talking about the avoiding and accommodating conflict resolution styles. This is Apostle Cheryl with Judas Roar Domestic Violence Awareness Initiative. Thanks for spending time with us on today. You be safe out there. Blessings to you.